The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, thick and cream-colored, with gold-embossed lettering that read, Thorne and Vale, Attorneys at Law. My name sat just below in calligraphy so elegant it felt like a whisper from another era. Miss Irina Reyes. I stared at it for a moment, heart tightening. I already knew what it was, even before opening it. Not because anyone told me, but because something inside me had shifted the moment Grandpa passed, like the quiet creak of an old door swinging open somewhere deep in my chest. At breakfast, my mother said it bluntly, without looking up from her tea. Grayson's will is being read next week. It's just a formality. Selena is the primary heir, of course. You don't need to embarrass yourself by showing up. I didn't argue. There was no point. Words bounced off my mother like raindrops on a sealed window, she never let them in. But the letter said otherwise. You have been named among the interested parties. I ran my fingers along the date and time. My name. Not forgotten. Just brushed aside too many times. I placed the letter beside my half-empty coffee, its steam curling between the words like breath held too long. I could already hear my father's voice in my head, don't make a scene. You were never part of that world. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I was never meant to be. But Grandpa once told me, those who sit with you in silence, they're the ones who stay. I folded the letter, slipped it into my coat pocket, and circled the date on my calendar. I didn't know what would happen. But this time, I would be in that room. When we were kids, the walls of our house didn't echo laughter, they echoed Selena. Her name was practically wallpapered across every room. Selena made first chair in orchestra. Selena got a perfect score on her science project. Selena's teacher says she's gifted. She was radiant, undeniably so. Tall, graceful, impossibly confident even at 10. She sparkled in every photo, made straight-A report cards look effortless, and somehow always knew when to smile at just the right moment. And me? I learned early on how to exist in the spaces she left behind. While she posed for holiday cards in satin dresses, I curled up in corners with books that smelled like dust and time. While she danced in recitals under hot stage lights, I was often in the lobby, drawing maps on the back of programs. No one told me not to shine, no one had to. They just didn't look. Our mother once caught me reading at the dinner table. Without even glancing up, she muttered, "Why don't you try joining the world for once?" I had. It just didn't stick. But Grandpa never asked me to try harder. He never asked me to be louder, or more like Selena. He just made space. He'd leave small things for me in the garage, an old compass, a cracked globe, a map of hiking trails he'd never had time to walk. "See where this takes you," he'd say with a half-smile, like he already knew I would. We didn't need to talk much. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch, sharing silence like a secret. One October, I brought him a tin of tea with bergamot and orange peel. He made 2 mugs without asking what I liked. We sat together in the gold light of falling leaves. No words, just the soft clink of porcelain and the wind in the trees. No one else knew about that day. No photos. No announcements. It didn't need an audience. As I stared at the circled date on my calendar, I realized something. I didn't want recognition. I didn't want revenge, or even validation. I just wanted to honor the man who saw me. Not because I tried to be seen, but because I never had to. The chapel sat perched on a hill, its stone walls damp with morning frost, like it had been holding its breath since Grandpa passed. The sky was a soft, expressionless gray, the kind that never quite gives way to sun or storm, just stillness. I arrived early, walking slowly up the gravel path in a plain wool coat that smelled faintly of cedar. It didn't fit quite right anymore, and the buttons were chipped, but it was warm. I tugged the collar higher as wind bit at my cheeks. No one waited for me at the door. Inside, the air was thick with hushed voices and too much perfume. A hymn played faintly from hidden speakers. The kind of melody meant to comfort, but it only pressed heavier on my chest. Selena was already there. Black silk wrapped around her like it had been custom-stitched to perfection. Her heels clicked with practiced grace. She moved through the room as if gravity didn't apply to her. People gravitated toward her, touched her arm, whispered condolences like she was the one who had lost the most. She didn't see me. Or she did, and chose not to. An usher, barely old enough to shave, glanced at me, hesitated, then pointed down a side aisle. "You can sit over there." So I did, back row, near the stained glass window. Alone. My parents sat in the second row, their shoulders squared like they were preparing for a family portrait. My mother leaned into Selena and whispered something, then smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Behind me, two voices passed in hushes. "Why is she here? I thought she cut ties years ago." I didn't turn around. The murmurs slid past me, familiar as wind through dry leaves. At the front of the chapel sat Grandpa's urn, small, matte black, quietly final. Beside it, a photograph of him in old work gloves, grinning beside his cabin. The only version of him that ever truly smiled. I focused on that. Not the whispers. Not the glances. Just that memory, his real self. The man who saw me. The air in the chapel shifted as Mr. Thorne entered, file tucked neatly beneath his arm, glasses sliding low on the bridge of his nose. His presence, though quiet, was magnetic, the kind of quiet that made everyone lean in a little. He didn't waste time. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "I'll proceed with the official reading of Grace and Reyes's will, dated June 12th of last year." I sat still near the window, fingers laced in my lap, trying not to fidget. The pew beneath me creaked with the smallest movements. Selena sat front and center, crossing her legs as if the entire room had been designed around her. Her chin lifted slightly. She already knew what came next, she thought she did, anyway. Mr. Thorne began, "To my granddaughter, Selena Reyes, I leave the Aspen Chalet, all furnishings therein, and the sum of $300,000, to be dispersed within 60 days of probate." There was no gasp, no surprise, only affirmation. My mother's lips curled faintly at the corners. My father nodded. Selena smiled like someone who'd just nailed a solo. And then, nothing. Mr. Thorne turned a page. The silence expanded. I felt it stretch between the pews like fog. Nobody looked at me, but I could feel them thinking it, that must be the end. No mention of her. Courtesy invite. Nothing more. I reminded myself to breathe. Then Mr. Thorne cleared his throat. "To Irina Reyes?" My name fell into the room like a match into dry grass. No one moved. Not even me. The silence didn't break, it shattered. My mother stiffened. My father blinked, like he hadn't heard right. Selena's head turned slightly, her smile frozen in place. For a heartbeat, the room stopped spinning, just long enough for my name to hang there, undeniable. I stared forward, unblinking, as Mr. Thorne adjusted his glasses again and began to read. "To my granddaughter, Irina Reyes," Mr. Thorne continued, his voice measured and steady, "I leave controlling interest in Reyes development, along with $53.5 million in personal and investment assets." The words didn't land right away. They seemed to float in the air, suspended between disbelief and shock. I didn't breathe. Selena blinked. Once. Twice. Then she leaned forward slightly, as if proximity to Mr. Thorne would make the words reverse themselves. My mother let out a small choking sound, barely audible but sharp as glass. My father exhaled, slow and hollow, like someone had knocked the wind out of him. No one looked at me. No congratulations. No outrage yet. Just silence thick enough to choke on. Mr. Thorne turned another page, unshaken. This includes 62% ownership of all corporate entities, full voting authority on the board of directors, and complete discretion over future leadership and asset distribution. Selena stood abruptly. Her chair scraped loudly against the polished floor. There has to be some mistake, she snapped. He would have told me. He should have told me. Mr. Thorne met her gaze calmly. There is no mistake. These changes were made in person, witnessed and notarized. Mr. Reyes was of sound mind at the time. He never even liked her, she hissed, voice cracking. She was never part of this. My hands remained in my lap, but my heart was slamming against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Mr. Thorne closed the file gently. There is one final note from Mr. Reyes for the family. A personal message. He paused, then read it slowly, without legal cadence, just intention. She was the only one who ever showed up without a camera. The weight of that sentence pressed down on the room like a storm front. Selena's mouth fell open, but no words came. My mother's face twisted between disbelief and something rawer, humiliation, maybe. My father stared at me. Not angrily. Just truly stared, like he hadn't really seen me in years. But I wasn't thinking about the money. Or the company. Or what it meant to control something that once belonged to everyone but me. I was thinking about Grandpa's porch, and how we used to sit for hours in silence that never felt empty. I was thinking about the way he never needed me to sparkle. Selena finally broke the silence, her voice tight. This isn't fair. I met her eyes, level. Calm. Certain. It wasn't supposed to be. Mr. Thorne gave a small nod. There is one more item. A personal letter addressed to you, Irina. He handed me a sealed envelope. I recognized the handwriting immediately, firm, slanted, deliberate. I didn't open it. Not yet. Not in front of them. I slipped it into my coat pocket, right where I'd placed the first letter. The one that started all of this. I didn't open the letter in the chapel. I waited until I was alone, back at the small, drafty motel room I had checked into the night before. The heater rattled like it was struggling to breathe, and the curtains didn't quite meet in the middle. Outside, snow had begun to fall in slow spirals, gathering quietly at the windowsill. I sat on the edge of the bed, the envelope in my lap, and stared at my name written in his handwriting, Irina. Steady. Decisive. Just like him. I traced the capital I with my finger before I finally broke the seal. 3 pages, carefully folded. No greeting, no date. Just words that spilled straight into the heart of me. Irina. You never asked for anything. But you gave me something none of them could, your time, without an agenda. In a house that measured love by volume and visibility, you loved with presence. That Sunday you came to sit with me, no cameras, no updates, no performance. I knew then what I had always suspected, you saw me not as a legacy, but as a man. I paused. My throat tightened. The words didn't praise, they recognized. The kind of recognition that feels like finally being seen after a lifetime of being transparent. I changed the will the following week, not out of anger. I love Selena too, in my way. But she came for the stories, not the silences. She memorized my accomplishments. You memorized the weight of my quiet. Do what you want with what I've left you. Keep it. Sell it. Change it. What I've truly given you isn't in dollars. It's trust. Trust that someone who shows up without needing to be seen is exactly the kind of person who should be holding the light when everyone else forgets where the switch is. I read that last line twice. Then a third time. The loops of his penmanship slowed near the end, like he'd taken extra care not to rush what mattered. They'll tell you you didn't earn it. That you don't deserve it. But I've lived long enough to know what the world rewards, and what it forgets. I'm choosing to remember you. Love, Grandpa. I folded the letter gently, the way you'd fold a paper bird that had once flown. I didn't cry. It wasn't grief I felt, it was something deeper. Not validation. Not vindication. Just a soft, steady certainty, like the ground under your feet after too many years of walking on glass. I slid the letter back into the envelope and tucked it under my pillow. That night, I slept like I had nothing left to prove to anyone. Because maybe I didn't. The next morning, I returned to the law office for the final paperwork. Mr. Thorne had asked me to come alone. But they were already there. My parents and Selena sat stiffly in the waiting area, dressed like they were posing for a family portrait none of them wanted to be part of. My mother clutched a silk handkerchief she hadn't used. My father scrolled his phone without looking at it. Selena stood the moment she saw me. "You manipulated him," she said sharply, each word slicing through the quiet like glass. I didn't flinch. He was old. He didn't know what he was doing. "You took advantage of that." I looked at her, not coldly, just clearly. Her makeup was perfect. Her blouse pressed. Her grief ironed into performance. "I didn't need to manipulate anyone," I said quietly. "I just loved him." Her jaw tightened. "Don't you dare make this about love. He was my grandfather too." "Then you should have known," I said, meeting her eyes. "He didn't care for cameras." My mother stiffened beside her. My father finally looked up, then down again. Mr. Thorne appeared in the doorway, professional as ever. "Mr. Reyes underwent 2 independent mental evaluations before amending his will," he stated. Both confirmed he was fully competent. His instructions were precise. "That doesn't mean it was right," Selena snapped. "No," I said. "It just means it was his choice." My mother turned away, shoulders trembling. She didn't cry loudly, but something cracked in the quiet. Selena gathered her things and clipped, angry movements. "This isn't over," she muttered, but her voice lacked its usual edge. She walked out, heels striking the tile like accusations. I didn't chase her. There was nothing left to explain. The drive to Grandpa's cabin took just under 2 hours. Snow flurried along the shoulders of the road, the kind that whispered winter's arrival but never quite settled. The winding turns came back to me like an old melody, familiar, patient, waiting. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled up the narrow drive. The mailbox still leaned to one side. The key turned in the lock without hesitation. Inside, everything was just as he'd left it. The pine table. The faded armchair with the threadbare blanket draped across the back. The row of books along the shelf that leaned ever so slightly to the left, as though time had gently nudged them into rest. Dust had settled, yes, but nothing had changed. Above the cold fireplace hung a single photograph in a worn wooden frame. I stopped. It was me. 10 years old, legs crossed on the porch step, a book open in my lap. Grandpa sat behind me, one hand resting gently on my shoulder. We were both looking down at the same page. I didn't even know the photo existed. Beside it sat a small leather-bound journal. I opened it carefully. The first line was written in his familiar hand. Irina was never loud. That's how I knew I could trust her. I sat in his chair, the journal warm in my hands, and let the silence gather around me, not heavy, but whole. Outside, snow fell softly. Inside, the fire I lit was slow, certain. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to prove I belonged. I simply was home. In a world that often rewards the loudest voices and the brightest performances, Irina's story reminds us of the quiet strength that comes from simply being present. She didn't chase attention, validation, or power, yet in the end, it was her quiet loyalty, her unspoken courage, and her unwavering authenticity that spoke the loudest. Her love for her grandfather wasn't wrapped in grand gestures or curated appearances, but in stillness, in time given freely, in afternoons spent without a single word exchanged, because sometimes, presence itself is the purest form of love. While others measured worth in applause, she lived in the spaces between the noise, and it was in those invisible moments that something truly lasting took root. Irina's journey teaches us that dignity does not require recognition, and that sometimes, the most powerful legacies are not built in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in how we make others feel seen. It is easy to perform for the world, to craft a version of ourselves that earns approval. It takes much more courage to remain true to who we are when no one is watching. Her grandfather saw her not because she demanded attention, but because she never needed it to begin with. The inheritance he left behind was not just financial, it was an inheritance of trust, of belief in quiet integrity. It was a declaration that those who walk softly but love deeply are not only worthy, but essential. In the end, Irina didn't win because she conquered others, she was chosen because she never abandoned who she truly was. The lesson is clear, truth doesn't shout, it endures. And when the noise fades and the lights dim, what remains are the people who showed up, not to be seen, but to see. The most profound gifts are given not to those who demand them, but to those who earn them in silence. Sometimes, the world forgets where the switch is, but those who carry light within never need to search for it.